who am I? What have I studied? Where do I come from? Why was I able to develop such a method or system? Why do I say things that I do say? Well, right now, I'm almost 73 years old. But to begin with, who am I? You know, I have talked to my conscience, my personal God, and thank that God to have directed me to do, I think, the right thing. And the reasons for why I am successful, my God and myself, in what has happened to date. My health, my being here, my being able to develop the system of mind training that is being used around the world by millions of people now, being translated in 16 now languages, and this being done by an individual who was born in Laredo, Texas, from poor parents, unable to send me to school, orphaned at age 4, and not being able to go to school. I just sometimes myself wonder, how was I able to start reading and writing the Spanish language? Not being able to go to school, even to learn my ABCs in Spanish or English, how was I able to start learning to read and write the English language? To a point now that I have books, I have written books, they're the best-selling listings right now. Well, who am I? Who is my God? Who is my conscience to have guided me in this manner? Some people say you're very lucky. Maybe it is that I have assigned to me a good conscience, a good God, a personal God, that I talk to often before I make my decisions. Now, this is why then, going through all of this with no education at all, I have a doctor's degree, that is, a doctor award. You see, a degree you only get by going through academic type procedures. So I don't have an academic degree in humanities. I have an award, a doctor award in humanities because of the work that I've done. But actually, I did not need it to get to where I am. I got it after the fact, after I got there. Now, getting there, I got there to my consulting my own personal God and doing what I have been able to do. And because of this, I have been attracted to read the Bible from cover to cover, and I mean the Old Testament and the New Testament. Of course, there's many things that I don't agree with that have been written in the Bible. And I'm saying that what's happening in this world, that's my personal concept, and it's coming from my internal conscience, from my personal God, that what has happened is misinterpreting the Bible. This is why we have not corrected the problems on this planet. The Bible is supposed to be human history, to be able to know when we made mistakes and not to repeat those mistakes. But it seems to me, my conscience is saying, my sound judgment is saying, that we are repeating the same mistakes. So I say then, what is the value if we do not abide by what is said there? And of course, some things do not make sense to me at all. By saying that I've heard a preacher on Sunday television saying that the Bible is God's word, that every word is God's word. Well, if they believe that the authors were talking to their personal gods, and this is what they wrote, well, I don't like what I see, what I read in some cases. Like from the very beginning, that the first two creatures that were created by Adam and Eve, one killed another. One killed his brother. Isn't that interesting? I don't like to hear this. I don't like to read about that. I like to read about only positive, constructive applications of what we're learning, not destructive. And then there's many mysteries, such as it is said that God told Adam not to eat from the prohibited tree? Well, there was only Adam and Eve and God. Who was a witness that heard God say this to bring the message to us? See, so there was only Adam and Eve and God. There were no witnesses there to brought the message to us that heard God say this to Adam. And they say, well, this was written by individuals who were inspired by God. I've asked these individuals who say this, can we now be also inspired by God? They say, no. But what gives you the authority to say that? What do you go by that we, being creatures of the same God, cannot be inspired by God? I think I'm being inspired by God, by my personal God, by my conscience, in doing what I've done in life. How I have learned to read and write the Spanish language without going to school. How I have learned to read and write the English language without going to school. By doing what I have done in the electronics field, I have 4 patents in electronics because I've ventured to abide by my internal personal God, my conscience. And then again, not only this, but having studied psychology and come up with this method of mind training that's being used by millions now all over the world, I'm saying that I'm contacting a good God, my personal God. And that is my common sense, my sound judgment when I decide on saying some things. So what I'm saying is that the scriptures, the Bible, is not all God's words. Now that's my personal concept. Because I don't like when they write about destruction and in wars and continue destroying and we getting worse and worse into more problems, such as in the free sex, such as abortions, such as continued warfare, continue distrusting one another, terrorism, limitations in fuels, for instance, and polluting the environment. We're getting worse and worse instead of better and better. I believe that people are not consulting their personal gods and abiding what the personal God suggests, their conscience. And this is why I believe the cancer problem and the AIDS problem, because they are hurting their immune system, and the only time they hurt their immune system is when they do not abide or do what their internal God recommends to be done. That's my personal concept. So this is what I think about the scriptures, that the Bible is not all God's words, because some of these writers were not really consulting their personal God. That's my personal concept. The only thing that comes to me in that concept is that these persons also included their personal benefits at the time it happened, because of conditions, environmental conditions, because of their present needs then, that we don't have the same needs now, and conditions are different. And because of the environmental influence or pressures on them, they included some of their personal benefits the way they thought, not necessarily everything that their personal God would indicate. In other words, I have always thought that truth and reality is only that when applied solves problems. So when I read the Bible and I get information that I can apply and to solve problems, I say that came through God's influence or inspiration. Now, information that does not solve problems, that only indicates destruction, I say that did not come from their God's influence or inspiration. The one thing, the main reason, and incidentally, the one exercise that you mentioned in when feeling sleepy and drowsy, I mean, that's excellent when you're driving on a highway. I mean, put your car aside. When you feel sleepy and drowsy, don't continue driving, you'll get into trouble. Pull aside, then go to your level. I mean, once at your level, you go ahead and make that statement. And when you open your eyes, you're refreshed again and ready to go on the road again. And every time you feel drowsy, sleepy, you're driving, pull to the side and apply that technique. Now, this other one, to relieve you of stress and strain and tension and fatigue or whatever you're doing during the day that causes mind and body fatigue exhaustion, that means your nervous system is contracting like so. And it gets to a point where you cannot let go. This is what causes the battle between you wanting to relax and not being able to, and this tension using an extra amount of energy that you could use yourself. So you are depleting your energy because of holding on to this contraction of the nervous system. When you get to your level, automatically all this relaxes and lets go. You see? Completely relaxed, you start all over again to start contracting again. So you want to break that pattern of contraction at least once a day, at midday, and maybe one at night before you go to sleep. It feels so good to sleep without this tension. So this is the reason, the main reason, why it feels good, you feel refreshed and so forth, because you have completely relaxed all the accumulated tensions totally at the time that you're at your level. Now that is the new psychology, behaviorism. That's what it's called now. That's the real psychology, behaviorism. Learn to control your body behavior, your mind's behavior. This is what we're supposed to be doing all the time. The more control you establish, the more constructive and creative you can be. You see, an uncontrolled mind always creates problems, causes problems. To be constructive and creative, we must discipline our minds. And this is called mind control. And this is what we're doing now, learning to discipline our minds in that manner. The brain dimensions are labeled by scientists, all these four divisions, the delta, the theta, the alpha, and the beta. We function with our eyes open, consciously at beta. We are in deep sleep, deep slumber at delta, the other end of the spectrum. Now, we know that deep sleep and slumber is in the delta range, so alpha is closer to the delta than beta. So when you have learned to dominate, to be able to develop controls in alpha, you're closer to the sleep level than you are if you have not developed those controls and you're still at beta. Beta is further away from delta. Delta is the sleep slumber, deep sleep or deep slumber of a human being. So let's say, for instance, you want to develop, if you have insomnia, you don't care if it's 5, 10, or 20, or 40 years, and you're taking drugs, we like to, at this point, recommend that whenever there is a need to take drugs, for whatever reason, it's best if you can do it with mind and eliminate drugs, do so. Whatever you can do with mind that drugs can do for you, use mind instead of drugs. So let's say you have been taking drugs to go to sleep for X number of years. You want to correct the problem, and you have already learned to go to your alpha dimension, your level, we call it your level. At night, enter your level, and then mentally imagine that you're in front of a blackboard, and mentally draw a big circle on the blackboard. Then you want to erase that circle. But how do you erase it? You start from the inner part of the circle, erasing the circle completely. You want to erase your circle completely, little by little, mentally. Now, once you have done this, to the right of the circle, you write the word deeper. Then draw your circle again, start all over again. And then within the circle, you write a big X within the circle, that the edges of the X touches the inner parts of the circle. Then start erasing it again, starting at the center of the X, working towards the edges, until the X is completely erased without erasing the circle. Now you know what it means to erase the circle. You do not want to erase the circle. When you have erased the X, to the right and outside of the circle, go over the word deeper. And that means deeper sleep, you see. So then you want to write in the circle the number 100, a 1 and 2 zeros, as big as you get them inside the circle. Then again, you start erasing the 100, starting at the center of the circle, working towards the edges, until you erase the 100 completely without erasing the circle. Be careful not to erase the circle. Mentally, you're doing this. Every time you write something inside the circle, outside of the circle, go over the word deeper. Every time you do this, you're entering a deeper, healthy level of sleep. Continue with numbers 99, 98, and erase them in the same manner. And every time you write them and erase them, go over the word deeper. And every time you do this, you will enter a deeper and deeper state of normal, physiologic sleep. Go like so until you go to sleep. If you get to 1, start all over again. Keep on going until you go to sleep by using this technique. And you'll find that later, as you go, you don't need to go as far in counting down. And as you go, you will find that later, by just drawing the circle, you will be asleep. Later, by just thinking about writing the circle, you will go to sleep. And this is the sleep control formula. Follow through, do not stop until you go to sleep using the formula or the technique. And this will help you to go to sleep naturally without the use of drugs.
Free and expand your magnificent mind with inspirational articles by Jose Silva himself at booksellers worldwide in audio, ebook, and print editions.